I was the only one there. My brother was on his way. He wasn't able to get there in time. So I was sitting in the room, and my mother was no longer able to verbalize. Her eyes were closed, but she was still responding. She was mouthing, and the eyebrows would go up and down with the mouthing, and it was appropriate. People would come in and say, "Hi, Phyllis," and she'd go, she would react. So we are sitting there. I'm sitting in a recliner next to her bed, and she is laying there peacefully. And all of a sudden I see this like misting, like a veil almost, filling the whole length of the room on the other side. And I can see movement on the other side. I can see like an elbow occasionally peek out, or a pant leg with a foot, peek out, and I'm watching. And as I'm sitting there watching, I noticed that there's a part of it to the end, on the far end where near my mother's head of her bed was, that started to open. And in that opening, I saw my grandmother step in, and she looked the exact same as I remember seeing her. And they present to you the exact same as you remember seeing them last. And I mean, she had her leisure suit on that she had made herself, and her glasses, everything looked the exact same. And her spirit walked over to my mother's bed, and she started stroking the inside of my mother's arm. And she would lean forward, and she would say something into my mother's ear. And my mother would then do that mouthing and eyebrow thing. And then she would stop. And then my grandmother would lean forward again, and she would start mouthing. So she was hearing them telepathically. And that's one thing too, is people's hearing declines here in the physical world. It does start to open up for the telepathically. So this happened 3 times. And while this was going on, I see this frantic wave behind my grandmother's head, and it was my beautiful sister. I had a sister that was murdered by a jealous boyfriend, and she was behind my grandmother. Again, she looked the exact same, and I could smell her perfume. It filled the room. She wore an unusual perfume back in the 80s, and it was very uniquely her, and I could smell it. And she kind of came from around and actually embraced me. I could feel her long hair falling over my face. I could smell her perfume. And then it seemed as she went to go back around the room, the whole wall had effaced. Everything, you could see everybody in there, and they had prepared, there were a lot of people there. They had prepared this beautiful reunion, this reception almost. And there was a table under this beautiful tree that kind of had a white flowing cloth on it, but there was like no food or anything on it, which I found out why later, which I'll share with you in a minute. But so I'm watching this, and it's like there was light, but it wasn't glarish. It was like the air emitted from within the atmosphere itself. There was not like a light source, like a sun. It was just like emitting from itself. So as I'm watching all of this, I'm watching all of these people, and I'm noticing this, there are colors there that we do not have here, that you can't even describe. I mean, it would be impossible. We would need a whole nother color wheel. And so I'm watching all of this going on, and then all of a sudden I notice a whole group of them clustering, like almost like in a football hold near the head of her bed. And I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, why are they doing that? And of course, the joy and the elation and the feeling coming from that other side is, there aren't words. There's no feeling that can touch it. In our words, there's no words that can touch it, but you can't help but smile. So I'm sitting there grinning from ear to ear. I'm watching this, and all of a sudden they kind of open up, and in the middle, my mother was standing. And it was like they were trying to help her stabilize her spiritual feet. So I'm watching her. She's beaming from ear to ear. One by one, they're approaching her. Quite a few of the people I recognized from this lifetime that I've seen and met before. There were a lot of them that I didn't, but my mother knew, and they were, and I mean, she was just so happy. And all of a sudden I look over and let me just back up and say this one thing. When my mother's mother and my sister came into the room, I did tell my mother, I said, Mom, Robin and Grandma are here to get you, to help you cross over. And she started doing the mouthing thing. And within 10 minutes, she took her last breath. She left. So here she is. I'm watching her. To me, she's not dead. And then all of a sudden I look over and I notice that she's not breathing anymore. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, here I am sitting. My mother's just stopped breathing. To me, she's not dead because I can see her right there, and what is the nurse going to think if she comes in and I'm sitting there, my mother's died and I'm grinning from ear to ear? That's not a normal response. I didn't think I did something to her, so I called in the nurse. The nurse came in the side of the room that all of the souls were welcoming my mother. They were on the other side of the bed. The nurse actually walked through them. They didn't seem to be bothered by it. So she pronounced my mother that she was gone, and I asked if I could stay in the room. And this whole ritual literally went on for 20 minutes our time. So as one would come up and greet her, they would kind of, go off and back to doing whatever they were doing. So the room kind of thinned out after a while, and there were like 10 of them left, 10 beautiful, some of them were beautiful. They were magnificent, angel looking. Some of them were very tall, beautiful, beautiful souls that were helping assist her over. And I've always heard the superstition about cracking a window, and I don't know, this could just be coincidence, because where I was sitting, there were windows behind me. And when they started to leave, they started to file out past me on the left-hand side, and they kind of leaned over and made connection with the top of my head. It was tingly. So the way that I see spirits is in my peripheral vision. I can see them as plain as I can see you. I can tell you what they have on. I can see them very, very clearly. However, when they get closer to me, it's more of a waffling to the air, like hot vapors coming off of a road, or gas fumes, that waffling effect to the air. I don't know how else to describe it in a way that people would understand it, but if they've seen gas fumes, it kind of looks like that. And as my mother came closer, I recognized her because she had beautiful legs, and she had on her patient gown still, and I recognized her legs. So as she passed by, I felt her do the same thing. And I never grieved my mother's loss.
If you liked this episode, please do subscribe for weekly, passionate, inspirational interviews.